everyone, welcome to another video. And for this particular video, I thought it would be interesting to kind of address my random thoughts and have a random discussion about the history behind the 4th of July. This isn't a holiday that I particularly focused on as of yet, so I kind of wanted to kind of express what I was able to research and what I was able to kind of conclude from that research as far as kind of the history behind it, because most generally speaking, Americans know what the 4th of July is. It's the celebration of Independence Day, when we declared our independence from the Brits back in 1776. But there's not a whole lot of context as far as how the holiday kind of evolved from where it started. So I thought it'd be interesting to kind of touch upon that a little bit in this video, since I haven't touched upon this holiday in particular before, and since it's still 4th of July Day weekend, I still feel that it would be appropriate to do so. So without further ado, now the interesting thing about the way in which our independence kind of really initially started was based upon a vote. Now, this vote actually did not take place on July 4th. The vote, the actual, I guess, approval for independence did happen on the 2nd of July. And some people, in particular at the time, John Adams, thought that this would be the actual day that we would celebrate our independence, was the day when all of the people that were part of the Continental Congress came and voted and ultimately came to the conclusion that independence was the way to go. So he was really in favor of that. And not July 4th, where basically the Declaration of Independence was adopted. And when we talk about the Declaration of Independence, we're talking about the document that Thomas Jefferson created and had all of the people sign basically off. So that's really what we are commemorating, is that document being adopted, and not necessarily the voting of the independence itself. And again, we're not celebrating the day when we actually got the independence. That's not the day that's really recognized, unfortunately for us. For us, the Independence Day is the day when we consider it to be kind of the official declaration of wanting independence, or seeking independence, or seeing independence as the most viable option. That's really the date that we recognize. And I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that it deals with the document that Jefferson created, and kind of fostering those values that he wrote down was really what we were trying to what we really commemorate and celebrate, more or less, and not necessarily the day when we won the war, basically the Revolutionary War, if you know history. And what's also kind of unique about the way in which people initially sort of celebrated Independence Day, at least in 1776, once this great independence or this approval for independence was kind of ratified and set in motion, people kind of reacted in a very celebratory way from the get-go. There were concerts, bonfires were a big thing, parades, cannon fire even to a certain extent, fireworks even were part of the festivities. And even during that time, especially during the time of the war, the people who were pro-independence would hold mock funerals of King George III because they were so against the king at the time and what he was doing to the colonies that they thought that they would give him that kind of level of treatment. And again, it's sort of similar to what happened in France too with the guillotine, um, the monarchy taking advantage of the common folk. People were in a real state of unrest during the time, and there was a lot of division um, within the United States initially. Not everybody was really set on achieving independence, even. Um, it only took time for it to eventually gain momentum and steam, and a long time for the war to even come to its final conclusion, even. And even afterwards, there was a certain level of division, even among the colonies themselves, um, about how the colonies should govern themselves, and all these different things were kind of part of the birthing stages of the United States. So um, people weren't as united, I think, back then. And it's funny to kind of see the history sort of repeat itself, because we see that being all too common nowadays, for everyone to kind of be all divisive and very politically extreme. And you kind of see that within its foundations. Um, we didn't start off like rock solid after the war, like, yay, we're all together. It's kind of like, no, now we have to figure out how exactly we want to figure this whole colonies out and how we want to administer government. And there were people that were more pro centralizing everything and people who were more laissez-faire, and so it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows and American flags and all that during that time. And as a result, the holiday didn't really gain as much momentum in the early stages of America existing. However, uh, during the War of 1812, once we had another conflict with Britain that ended up getting resolved by us winning again. And on top of that, later on, the passing of probably the two most influential people um, during that time period, Thomas Jefferson, as well as John Adams. And again, they did pass away a little bit after, I believe, the War of 1812. But again, that also was another factor that might have contributed into people kind of being more on the side of, yeah, let's kind of all, unite together and put aside our differences, and let's really commemorate and celebrate, what Jefferson and John Adams and all the people did for us, and let's celebrate the founding of this great nation, so to speak. Uh, you know, let's commemorate that. And what's also really interesting is that John Adams, as well as Thomas Jefferson, died on the same day, and on July 4th. So that goes to show you how that level of coincidence and influence, especially among such popular and well-known figures of the time, could have played a drastic role on top of this War of 1812 that ended up resulting in another victory for us, and further solidifying that we really don't want to be involved with Britain, and we want to we want to take care of ourselves, basically. Um, and it did not become an actual holiday until 1870. So yes, it's wasn't really a federal holiday up until this point in 1870. So within that time frame, there were kind of the traditional celebratory things that people would do, and you know, it kind of spread throughout the nation here and there through different cities and towns, um, and a lot of the things that you expect from the 4th of July that you see today, like parades and picnics and military displays, you know, all that was still back then a huge part of celebrating the 4th of July. Fireworks as well. They For my research, they did mention that processions and oratory was another big thing, more so I think back in the day than it is really now. I mean, yeah, maybe the president gives a speech or something, you know, but it's not like everybody is out there kind of really giving speeches all that much. I think. I mean, it's more of people just celebrating with food, with family, with friends, with honoring the nation and seeing the beautiful fireworks displays, and having barbecues and picnics and whatnot. You know, that's more of the tradition now. Barbecues really weren't a thing back then, so picnics kind of converted into barbecues eventually, but we still do picnics. I mean, that's still a common thing for people to do on 4th of July. But that's really the essence of the holiday. I mean, it didn't really evolve or change as much as I anticipated, but it still remains to be an important part of American traditions and the history. And I can definitely see why everybody takes the time to really appreciate and celebrate it. And um, it's interesting to see the context within the history, because usually we think of Independence Day as this like universal um, decision that we made, but it really was the decision of a few group of people who thought it was the best way to go. And then it wasn't until enough time passed that eventually people saw that that was the way to go eventually as well. So again, it kind of sparked something, you know. It's one of those holidays that just gets the ball rolling for something, you know. Um, it's not really as important of a day because if you think about it, you know, winning the war was actually probably a way more important date for Americans and American history, but that probably wasn't the case. Well, it really wasn't the case of the day of independence, because the Day of Independence centers around the declaration of it and not the actual date of actually getting independence. So yeah, it's more of celebrating an ideal and maybe not necessarily the reality. And again, that's how a lot of holidays are. You know, it's more about the symbolism and the meanings behind them, rather than what they actually did or who or what was involved. But yeah, I think that's really all I can say about it. If there are any questions, comments, concerns, I'd be more than happy to answer them. I hope you had a fantastic 4th of July if you are from America, and I hope you learned something today, whether you are from America or from a different country who doesn't really know too much about American history. But until next time, everybody.